Okay, so let's pick up 408, the form. I want to go over the form real quick and show you some of the ideas. The top section is the seller's disclosure. He's going to disclose. There are two things he's going to disclose. Letter A says the presence of lead-based paint. Number 1 says there is a known lead-based paint. And number 2 says, I have no knowledge of lead-based paint. Notice it does not say there is no lead-based paint. All right? It's kind of like going to court, which we've argued this before. You're either guilty or not guilty. There's never an innocent plea. You're not innocent. We just don't have enough to prove you're guilty. So you're guilty or not guilty. The answer is the same. Either I have knowledge or I have no knowledge. All right? Number 1A, I have knowledge. Number 1B says I have no knowledge of it. This is the one law where ignorance is bliss. You've heard that statement about ignorance of the law is no excuse. This is one example where it can be. Hey, I don't know. That's allowed. Mark 1B, I have no knowledge. Number 2 says, here are the records. 2A says, here are the records that we have that show the lead-based paint. 2B says, I have no records. All right? So hopefully your client's going to mark 1B and 2B. I have no knowledge and I have no records. All right? Then your seller is going to sign this down at the bottom and attest to the fact that I've told you I have no records and I have no knowledge of it. That middle section is the buyer's section. So the seller fills this form out, marks 1A, marks 1B and 2B. The seller then, or the buyer then does C, D, and E. You are required to give all of the records to the buyer, and he marks off letter C, I've received all the records. Even if you don't have records, this form counts as one of the records. So you still have to give him the form. You can't say, well, I had no knowledge, so I didn't give it to him. It was no big deal. No, you still have to give him the form, even though you have no records, because that form is one of the records. B says, or D says, they got a pamphlet on how to protect your family on lead-based paint. Typically, that's given by the selling agent to their buyer. Hey, here's a pamphlet I want you to read. So they are aware of the hazards, okay? And then letter E, because ignorance is bliss and the seller doesn't know, he must give the buyer a chance to find out. So the buyer has a 10-day window with which to, oh, you don't know? Okay, I want to know, so at my cost, I will hire a company, and we'll talk about it, to see if that actually is lead-based paint in the house. Or the buyer can waive his right to find out. The buyer must sign one of those two. Either I want the 10-day window, or I will waive my right to have the inspection. All right? Now, the good thing I will tell you is both of these forms, including the pamphlet, can be downloaded absolutely free, and the only cost is the cost of that paper and the ink to print it. But you can literally go to EPA.gov, print out the pamphlet, and give it to your client. Most of us now, in today's world, save it as a PDF on your computer somewhere and just keep using that one over and over, that pamphlet, so that when you get a buyer, say, here, let me send you this pamphlet in an email. Read that pamphlet. All right? Letter F is the first time that you guys will actually acknowledge something. You will put your initials in letter F saying that you have explained all of this issues to your buyer client so they understand what lead-based paint is, what it can do, and how we need to protect ourselves. So you will then sign that. And then the buyer will sign his section saying he did what he's supposed to do. So what you have is a form at the end where the seller says, I have no records and I have no knowledge. The buyer has initialed that he understands that he received this form, he's received the booklet, and he has either waived his right or is going to exercise his right, and you as an agent have signed saying, yes, I've told my client all about this, both people have signed, that goes in the closing documents. And if it's not there or it's not signed, the title company will stop the deal. Hey, we need to stop. There's not a signed lead-based paint form. All right? I've had that happen. What the buyer did at that particular point was waive his right. So they went ahead and finished the form sitting at the closing table. Kind of a pressurized situation, because if he really wanted to exercise his right for that 10-day window, you would have to stop the closing for 10 days until he went and had the form. So it's not advantageous to wait till the closing day. It puts pressure on the buyer that may be unfair, because the only way to close would be to waive his right. Otherwise, they're going to have to wait. All right? So lead-based paint, probably the single biggest form and issue you guys will deal with. Once again, encapsulation. Encapsulation is the answer. There are two ways to test for lead-based paint. One is called the risk assessment method. The risk assessment method says, hey, the house was built before '78 and there's chipped or peeling paint in the living room. Let's assume it's lead-based paint and just move forward with the encapsulation. All right? That's a risk assessment. There are companies out there. One is called American Lead Lab. I was the director of American Lead Lab for about 9 months. And I will tell you a story about that lab coming up. Where you take the lead into the lab, they'll use a gas chromatograph and flame it and go, boom, yeah, there's lead ions in it. Must be a lead-based paint. Do what, sir? Oh. Well, I thought I was doing good and you just blessed me for something. Okay, thank you. I need all the help I can get. All right, so lead-based paint encapsulation, asbestos encapsulation, big things. All right, moving on, radon. The listing agent, well, it's both agents' responsibility. The listing agent's responsibility to make sure his seller fills the form out, 1A or 1B and 2B, and then they give that form to the selling agent, in which the buyer then takes it, where it's already filled out, and they fill out C, D, and E, and say, yes, I got the form, yes, I received the pamphlet, I want to waive my right and initial that, and then you, as the selling agent for the buyer, initials it saying, I did my job by telling my client all the potential hazards of lead. They understand this. That's how they signed it. And then the buyer signs the bottom, and the seller had already signed. So you have a form that's now complete. It's completed by both sides. The top section's completed by the sellers, the middle section's completed by the buyer, and then that last bottom line is completed by the selling agent. All right, radon. I love radon. When people say I have a radon problem, I love telling them, no, you don't. You have a bismuth issue. Radon decays to bismuth plus a daughter product called an alpha particle. That alpha particle is the danger. But we don't have a way to measure that, so we measure radon. To me, that's funny as heck, because that's the decay chain in the nuclear engineering field. I can see nobody in here is impressed with that. Radon is a colorless, odorless byproduct of the decomposition of the nuclear decay chain. Most everything in the world either is radon, was radon, or will be at some point in its life. All right? The problem with radon is that it is what we call an A1 carcinogen. What's carcinogen mean? Cancer causing. We have human study data. That's what A1 means. That radon will cause cancer. Okay? The number that we're looking for is 4 picocuries. Anybody know what pico is? It's not that cool stuff you put on your, yeah. The pico means 10 to the minus 9. So we're looking for basically 0.000000004. 04. Minus, that's a very, very small number. Have 100 million ping pong balls. 4 of them are red, the others are white. That's enough to cause a problem. Figure that number. All right. The answer to radon is mitigation, and they have radon systems just like sump pumps work. If you guys understand how a sump pump works in your basement, water gets in your basement, it flows to that little pit, then you got a pipe that sucks it out and spits it outside, right? We have the same system for radon. Radon comes up from the earth, so it's very big in basements or unfinished crawl spaces. If you are on a slab, odds are you don't have a radon problem. If you're in a finished basement, probably don't have a radon problem, because the carpet and the padding and all that stuff is usually enough to stop that so you don't have a problem. All right? If you do have a problem, you get a radon mitigation system, which is nothing more than a fan that sucks the air from the basement out up the wall, and they vent it out one of the basement windows to your neighbor beside you. So guess what this neighbor on this side's doing? He's blowing his on you and you're blowing yours on him. No. So radon can be a problem, but we have mitigation systems that can virtually eliminate that issue by constantly recirculating the air in a basement through this sump pump, finger quotes, kind of setup. All right? They make radon testing systems if you guys want to try it. Looks like a little cat food can. It's about that big around, or tuna. Pop the top off, set it in your basement, let it set 24 hours. You come back the next day. If it's changed colors, that's because there's an interaction with that equation, and you know you have a radon issue. All right? So if you want a radon inspection as part of your home inspection, you have to actually ask for that. That is not standard in most home inspectors' repertoire. And they will, a good home inspector is going to ask you, do you want a radon inspection with this? And that's up to your client. It adds some fee to it. All right?